What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here with the Face Off Sports Network. It's Waiver Wire Tuesday for NFL Week 10. We're going to take some waiver wire questions, trade questions, whatever you have. If you're in the chat, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, filter them in. I will get to as many as possible. We're going to talk about some player movements today. In between, as we know, today was the NFL trade deadline, and it was quite busy compared to years past. As you know, the past few years, we are seeing the NFL trade deadline pick up significance compared to like 10 years ago. It was a non-factor. That is no longer the case. We have PJ Hatcher, our first one in here from Twitch. Zach Linton. Yes, I am solo today. PJ is saying he won 125 to 111. Congratulations. We have who's this? Zolrat. White Wild Trades. I'd like to hear some of them. You're meaning in the trade deadline day, not in your fantasy league. Where do you want to start? Zach Linton puts in here Mike Williams. So let's just start there because this was one. I remember when the New York Jets initially traded for Devontae Adams, the odd man out was always Mike Williams. And, you know, a lot of people want to put it to that game where Mike Williams, I guess, ran the wrong route. It was an interception. Jets lose, and he was in the Aaron Rodgers doghouse. If the Jets acquired a receiver, I truly believe it was always Mike Williams to go anyway. He was on a one-year deal, extremely movable. They were never trading Garrett Wilson or Corley, or certainly not Alan Lazard. So Mike Williams was always the odd man out. I initially had him pegged to Kansas City, and this was obviously before Kansas City traded for DeAndre Hopkins. I thought Kansas City was the smash fit. Kansas City gets D-Hop, who went off last night, and Mike Williams to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was always in the market for a number 2 wide receiver to complement George Pickens, right? They have some dudes on the roster, but they don't have any players of significance. Mike Williams, I get he's a little bit long in the tooth and he's injury prone, but if he's healthy and he can get acclimated to this offense, Mike Williams adds another big play dynamic, because that's what the Steelers passing attack is all about. It is about the big play, whether we look at George Pickens, and now we have Mike Williams there. I'm drawing a blank on their other receiver, but he made some big plays in his own right, and I'm sure it'll come to me at the wrong time. But this is a big play, explosive offense complemented by a ground and pound rushing attack. And with Russell Wilson in there, this is an ascending offense that I want pieces of in fantasy football moving forward. And, you know, I take a lot of heat for it. I don't think Arthur Smith is that bad. I get he misused Bijan Robinson and misused the Atlanta Falcons. He also had terrible quarterback play. He didn't have the right guys to work with under center, which really matters the most to make everything work. The reason why Arthur Smith even got a head coaching job is because he was outstanding when he was with the Tennessee Titans with Henry and A.J. Brown and Tannehill. This is a similar built personnel grouping, obviously downgrades across the board, but there's enough here to where this Arthur Smith system is going to work. We're seeing Najee Harris now rip off 100-yard games like it's nothing. We're seeing George Pickens. I get George Pickens was a disappointment the last time he played. You got to remember, there were multiple big plays called back, and at least one, maybe even 2 touchdowns called back into that football game. Otherwise, we would have had back-to-back big games out of George Pickens with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is even clicking. If you need a wide receiver down the stretch, that's not going to cost you much. I'm knocking on the door of the Mike Williams fantasy manager. And it might take a week or two for him to click with Russell Wilson. Maybe not, because of the skill set. Russell Wilson's going to put the ball up there, and his guys going to come down with the contested catch. More so where Aaron Rodgers, he wants his guys to run the pristine route, and Aaron's going to put it right there. I think this might be a better fit for Mike Williams when it's all said and done. And again, he's going to be free, right? He's not going to cost you a lot in redraft. You're not going to have to flip anything significant to get him because he hasn't really done much this season. One game with double-digit PPR points all the way back in week 4, barely on the field for the New York Jets, barely targeted. He's only had, every game but 3, he's had fewer than 3 targets. That, in theory, should change with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's go back to some of these questions. PJ is saying Lattimire to the Commanders, and this is not really a fantasy thing. This is more of an NFL point of view, and I will give my take on there before we get back into questions. This is, Washington believes that they are legitimate contenders in the NFC. And if you look at the state of the NFC right now, why wouldn't they be? The Commanders, you can make the case they could beat the Philadelphia Eagles. They could win that NFC East. At worst, they're a wild card team. And we've seen Washington, pulling up their schedule, they've handled some pretty good teams, right? Obviously, the game against Baltimore, everybody's losing to Baltimore outside of the early games this year. Like, Baltimore's a powerhouse in the NFC. Baltimore is in the Super Bowl conversation, at least in the regular season. It's hard to find a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson, who's going for his possibly 3rd MVP. And the way they're throwing the ball, like, this is the best I think we've ever seen Lamar Jackson throw the ball, and they keep adding weapons. So, okay, let's give Washington a mulligan for that game, right? We saw Denver, right? A little bit of a fugazi team. They got their asses kicked this weekend. Washington, they lost by a touchdown. If you look at some of these other games, like the games they're supposed to win, when it comes to Washington, they handled Cincinnati, right? That could have went either way. Cincinnati did not hit their stride. The Arizona Cardinals, who are a first-place team, kicked their ass. Cleveland, a game they should have won. Baltimore, one-score game. They beat up the Panthers. The Bears, I don't think that game was as close to the final score. And the Giants, it's a division game. I'll give, those are usually close. So this is a good football team. They're going to be tested. They get the Steelers, Pittsburgh coming up. They got teams down the stretch like the Falcons at the end of the season. I don't see many losses on the Commanders' schedule. And if they get a home playoff game, you bring in Marshone Lattimire. And this is a defense that's ascending. They don't have a lot of talent. And this is all Dan Quinn. Lattimore is a legitimate player. So I love that addition for the Washington Commanders. And again, who knows what could happen? Like, we saw it last year with CJ Stroud in year 1. He won a playoff game. I think we could see a similar trajectory of the Washington Commanders. Marshone, I'm just typing something out for my back-end work that I do here when I'm off air. But, okay, so where are we now? Okay, we'll still react to these trades before we get into waiver wire questions. PJ again putting in here, Khalil Herbert to the Bengals. Not shocking. And our guy Pete Terranova, Supernova, you know who he is. Go check out his defensive streamers video that was just published today. He actually called, I think, on yesterday's show that, watch out for Khalil Herbert to the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was always like every year it seemed like Khalil Herbert, he's going to be traded. He's not used right. He's a good back, but the Bears don't use him. When are they going to trade him? When are they going to move him? It finally happened. And he goes to a team that needed a running back. Why do they need a running back? Zach Moss, it looks like he suffered a season-ending neck injury. Now, what do we do with Khalil Herbert from a fantasy football perspective? I talked about Herbert. I did the waiver wire video that went out early this morning, and I included Khalil Herbert in it. He was a late addition because I recorded right after the trade news broke. And is he going to immediately jump into that Zach Moss role. And what was the Zach Moss role? Because if you remember, Zach Moss, early in the season, Zach Moss was the guy. Whereas Chase Brown was like, what's going on? Like, the Chase Brown truthers, they were hiding. And I'm a Chase Brown guy. I'm like, what the hell's going on? This doesn't make sense. Chase Brown is a superior running back. And just like last year, we see a hot Zach Moss with the Colts. And then he started fading and fading and fading. And again, it goes to why I faded Zach Moss in the offseason. There's a reason why Buffalo, who was in need of a running back when they had him, they couldn't wait to get rid of him. I think they traded him for Nyheim Hines. That's telling of who he really is. And maybe he wears down sooner. But, the Zach Moss project, leading up to the injury, it was not good. He was losing snaps to Chase Brown, when at least when they were both popping at the same time, they were getting a similar snap rate. And then, when it was all said and done, like Moss was losing significant ground. And obviously this week he's out. So Chase Brown is the lead back. Zach Moss left 10.8 touches per game. I don't see Khalil Herbert getting 10.8 touches per game out the gate. Maybe he works up to it. What's in Khalil Herbert's favor? Not a lot of competition in this backfield. Travion Williams, Kendall, Milton. So yes, Khalil Herbert, it's a short week. There's a really good chance he's active on Thursday Night Football. Doesn't mean I want to use him in our fantasy lineups, right? It's a running back. They can put him in some base formations, give him some base plays. It's easier to get acclimated in theory as a running back than it is a pass catcher, especially, a wide receiver or a tight end. So I'm expecting another full workload from Chase Brown on Thursday night. He played a season best 56 snaps last week, while Travion and Kendall Milton had 7 and 5 snaps. So we know Chase Brown can handle the duty. Let's see what happens this week. I just don't see a world where we see Khalil Herbert, and then in week 11, you got the Chargers, so the next two matchups are not great for running backs. I think the skill set of Chase Brown is where he saves fantasy managers because he's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. And maybe he can raise his fantasy floor in these tough matchups. He's always going to have the goal line and red zone upside. But maybe down the stretch, if Chase Brown gets banged up, get Khalil Herbert. But I'm not in any rush to add him because I don't think we can use him for the next 2 games, barring an injury to Chase Brown. Let's see. So let's get into some of these questions now. Jared Fortin, our leadoff hitter. Let me get a drink. So he needs a running back. He has 2 offers. Give Justin Jefferson for CMC and Pickens, or Otten for Tracy and Ertz. I don't want to give up Justin Jefferson. That's, I think you asked a similar question last night, and my answer was very similar. He's not a player I'm willing to part ways with. And I'm going to be real. I was wrong. I was dead wrong on Justin Jefferson this year, not because of the talent. I was unsure about Sam Darnold and this quarterback play. But Sam Darnold, for what it's worth, playing outstanding football, and Justin Jefferson is the benefactor of that. He's been healthy. He's been relatively matchup proof. Like, are we getting those monster games out of Justin Jefferson? No, but is he one of the best, if not the best, consistent, productive fantasy wide receiver right now that we can depend on a week-to-week basis? Yes. Every single game, outside of 2, he's had at least 19 PPR points. The 2 that he missed, he had 15. Everything else over 20. You're not going to find better than that. He is getting 33% of his team targets, which is 100th percentile, using the tools on rotowire.com. He's being targeted on 32.4% of the routes he is running. He is averaging 3.68 yards per route run and averaging 95.2 air yards per game. This is what Sam Darnold. He's a do-it-all receiver. He's healthy. I just, even against Indy, right? JJ doesn't score. They use Addison to do that, but we still get 7 of 9 targets for 137 yards receiving. His third game over 115 yards this season. I mean, I'm not willing to lose that production. Now, I get it. CMC is going to give you some spike weeks. I still question, are we going to get a fully unleashed CMC? I know the 49ers need him. I don't know how healthy he is. What if the 49ers, I mean, this is a realistic scenario, and I know 49ers fans don't want to hear it. They've been victimized by the injury bug this year, and it happens. We've seen it through the years to a lot of teams. If they keep losing pieces, if they don't start winning games, and CMC's, but like who's to say if they're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs in December, which can happen, right? I know 49ers, it'll never happen. It can happen. They put, like the same thing I said about like CeeDee Lamb or Dak. Like if this season keeps going south and he's playing, like why put them out there when they're your future? And CMC doesn't have a lot of years left. So I'm not moving Justin Jefferson to get CMC and Pickens. He is just too consistently good and productive. And some nice games down the stretch, couple of tough ones, but you get Jacksonville, Zona, Atlanta, Seattle, Green Bay, and then I get like Jair Alexander gives him fits and everything. But if Jair is out, he's missed some time this year, it's wheels up. So I'm not willing to do that deal. On the other side of it, Otten for Tracy and Ertz. If you just like, who's your other tight end? Because, Cade Otten, we're now seeing multiple games now where he's being hyper-targeted everywhere on the field. He's scoring touchdowns like he is the passing attack, the receiving attack for Tampa right now. I'm not willing to move Cade Otten. I want Tracy, but the issue is if you don't have another good tight end, like you're playing the game with Zach Ertz. Taysom's nice. They're going to use him, but he's volatile. And then Jonnu Smith, he's actually the quiet sleeper I like because of how many targets he is getting with and without Tua. But I don't love either one of these deals. There's got to be something else out there without you conceding Justin Jefferson. And the only way, I don't mind the Otten for Tracy. I need a better tight end than Zach Ertz that I can rely on because right now, Cade Otten, rest of season, with this target share, he could be the tight end 1 the rest of the way because he's certainly the tight end 1 in the past 3 games. All in one show, we traded Kittle for Swift and Puka, Nakua, and Mondo. I see the super chat. Give me your next. So all in one show, we traded Kittle and Swift for Puka and Connor, and you have Kelsey. So number one, that's great. We're getting the busiest, most consistent season out of George Kittle. So I don't, and you have Kelsey, of course. So you don't need both. Right now, we are starting to see Travis Kelce and the KC offense overall is starting to heat up. Kelsey, after that horrific start, 4 out of his past 5 games, over 15 PPR points, and now back-to-back games, over 24. And it's only going to get better because this offense, with D-Hop, it's starting to turn the corner, and the Chiefs are the Chiefs. And down the stretch, you have an outstanding run of tight end schedules, especially weeks 12 to 14. So that's fine. I'm fine moving Kittle. Swift's been outstanding. That's the one I don't love giving up. But in return, you're getting Puka and James Conner. I'm kind of into this deal. Puka, I get he got kicked out of the game, but when he was in there on the limited snap share on his return, he was clearly the number 1 wide receiver and the best wide receiver on the field over Cooper Kupp. And James Conner, he's been, hopefully knock on wood, he doesn't suffer the usual perennial injury where he misses a game or two. But, I would put Connor up there with DeAndre Swift. I think we've gotten some more pop games out of DeAndre Swift, but I don't think it's that significant of a downgrade where I'm not making this move. Connor's been an extremely high floor player every game, but two over 12 PPR points, and in quite a few games over 17. He's the guy there. It was a fluke this week where he doesn't score and Benson does. Like, Connor gets knocked out of the game, Benson scores. He obviously comes back in the game later. It's just if he gets into the end zone, he's giving us 20 PPR points easily. 18.4 touches per game, 31.3% broken tackle rate, which is 19th percentile. So I'm all good making this move, especially when you have Kelsey to fall back on. And I don't think it's a significant downgrade by running back. And I think Puka, as long as he doesn't do any more bonehead bullshit and gets kicked out of a game, you have a top 12 wide receiver on a week-to-week basis. Let's go to Mondo with the super chat. Appreciate the super chat, Mondo. Trade Aaron Jones and Dalton Kincaid for Josh Jacobs and Evan Ingram, and it is tight end premium. So Aaron Jones, Dalton Kincaid, Josh Jacobs, Evan Ingram. So I feel like you are making this move to get Evan Ingram. And you're worried about Dalton Kincaid. I'm worried about Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid this year has been a big-time, I'm going to call him a bust, right? And I was in on Dalton Kincaid on draft season. He's bust. From where we drafted him, and I get a lot of tight ends have been bad, Dalton Kincaid's been getting volume. Since week 4, he's had at least 6 targets in every game. 3 of those games over 7. And last week he had 10 targets. 4 for 32, no PPR points. And if you look, he's only scored 2 touchdowns. That's the difference. Dalton Kincaid is not scoring touchdowns, which limits his fantasy value. And he's actually had 4 red zone targets in the past 2 games. He scores against Seattle, blanks against Miami. Some nice tight end schedules coming up. Going into the bye, Indy, KC coming out. You got the Rams, you got the Pats. At least, he might have some spike games in there. Evan Ingram is this passing attack right now. He's going to get the volume. Now, granted, last week, 10 targets, 9.5 PPR points, still better than Kincaid. No Christian Kirk. No Gabe Davis is, in and out of the lineup at wide receiver. The rookie Brian Thomas Jr. is playing hurt. Like, Evan Ingram has, double-digit opportunity, double-digit target upside every game. Down the stretch. He has a gauntlet of bad matchups. Minnesota, Detroit, bye, Houston, Tennessee, Jets. Then you have a good one against Vegas and a bad one to close in the fantasy playoffs against Tennessee. I might actually pivot here, Mondo, and maybe I don't want Evan Ingram. I get he can get a boatload of targets. That is a gauntlet of top 10 matchups, top 10 bad matchups when it comes to fantasy points conceded to tight ends. It is bad. Literally, everyone I just read off but one are single digits. And I get volume as king. Kincaid's also getting decent volume, like I just went over, and he has quite a few favorable matchups. And then you look, like I'd rather have Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs. So I'm standing pat. I'm glad I did my due diligence for you and looked at that schedule for Evan Ingram. It scares the hell out of me. Minnesota 8th. Detroit 3rd, bye. Houston 1st. Tennessee 7th. Jets 6th. Vegas 28th. Tennessee in a fantasy championship 7th. That worries me. And for context, last week against Philly, 4th against tight ends. 10 targets, 5 for 45, 9.5 PPR points. So, yeah, you got the volume, didn't really do much with it in a bad matchup. And if that's what we're going to get, then I'd rather take the chance, roll the dice for those Kincaid spike weeks as he has better matchups down the stretch. And also, I'd rather have Aaron Jones than Josh Jacobs. And I don't think that's particularly close. Aaron Jones is a lot more involved in this Minnesota offense. Like, we have Justin Jefferson. Aaron Jones is very much the number 2 there when it comes to touches and how reliant they are on him. So let's scale back. And guys, if I missed your question, ask it again. I'm still trying to work from the top down. I'm not used to being solo, so you got to bear with me. So a tree hugging Hunter, rest of season, Caleb Nix, Winston Hunter, Lawrence Rogers. I'm going to say, if I had to rank them, I would go Bo Nix. I would go Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert, and then Williams. Bo Nix brings that high rushing floor to the table, and I get that the Baltimore Ravens devoured the Denver Broncos, but even in that blowout, we still got 22 quarterback points out of Bo Nix. And since week 3, he's gone over 20 quarterback points in all but one game, or no, all but 2 games. So I'm fine with Bo Nix down the stretch. A couple of nice matchups. So he would be my number 1. My number 2 is Aaron Rodgers. This offense is starting to click. He looks like he has that rapport back with Devontae Adams. And of course, Garrett Wilson. We're finally getting that breakout year. And then Herbert. Herbert, they're starting to throw more. As crazy as it sounds, if you look at the numbers, they're throwing a little bit more. It's a little bit more volume with the Los Angeles Chargers, with guys like Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey. It's like a wide receiver by committee. Obviously, McConkey's probably the one here, but they have enough pass catchers. Even Disley's contributing. So I certainly would put Justin Herbert number 3. And again, I love Caleb Williams. I love the schedule. It is not working out for whatever reason. Where are we? So Marlon, with the emergency trade, emergency question: should I trade Saquon Barkley, Drake London, Brian Thomas, and DeAndre Hopkins? So we got Saquon, London, Thomas, Hopkins for Neighbors, AJ Brown, David Montgomery, Addison. Let me see. Saquon. I am going to say probably not. I'd rather have your guys. I'm not moving Saquon right now. Drake London, I get he's a little bit banged up. Maybe he misses a game. Maybe he misses no time, but it looks like a short-term injury. And this is an ascending Falcons offense. Brian Thomas, he's the tough one because I don't love the upcoming schedule, but he's really all they have. And he's also proving that he can play hurt. And then DeAndre Hopkins, look what he did last night. I get it was a really easy matchup. Some of those balls that Mahomes was throwing up to Hopkins, it looks like the trust was there already. He was coming down with the contested catch. It just looks like a match made in heaven. And, that was a Mahomes game. Like, it's been a long time since I saw Mahomes and that KC offense click like that. And I want my hands on DeAndre Hopkins. My biggest issue with Neighbors, if we pull up Malik Neighbors' numbers, he's had the volume. 2 games, and I said this a few weeks ago, Andrew Thomas is going to cripple Malik Neighbors. And why? Because Andrew Thomas, outstanding tackle, done for the year. We know that Daniel Jones, without an outstanding offensive line helping him, turns back into a pumpkin. We see the bad Daniel Jones. The bad Daniel Jones really from the years past. The best version of Daniel Jones, that playoff year, their line was pretty good. So in 3 games without Thomas, we're seeing under 14 PPR points from Neighbors, and these are matchups where he's gotten targets of 8, 13, and 11. The volume is there. The catches and receptions or the receptions and yards are kind of there. He's not scoring. And if we look at the games from weeks 2 to 4, when he was giving us 28, 28, 23 PPR points, he was also getting double-digit targets, but a little bit more. He was popping more for yards. He was in the end zone. If you look the past 3, and there were a lot of red zone targets. If you look the past 3 games, Malik Neighbors has had zero red zone targets in the past 3 games. And he's had target shares of 8, 13, and 11, not one in the red zone. Where in that run from weeks 2 to 4, where he's giving us over 23 PPR points in each of those games, he's had a total of 6 red zone targets. So I'm afraid. I think that the volume is going to be there for Neighbors. He certainly has a good schedule. I'd rather have your guys. The best guys in this deal to me are Neighbors, and maybe A.J. Brown and Saquon. Like, I'd rather have Saquon and those wide receivers. I think you'll get by with Drake London and Brian Thomas. And certainly, like, I bit the bait on DeAndre Hopkins. Let's go. Mandy took our advice last week, and I lost to my cousin. Thanks. Because I sat Flowers, and he went off for 30 points. Josh Down puts up 9. I'll apologize for that, right? Like, and Pete and I were both very much in on sitting Zay Flowers against Denver. Denver's secondary and defense overall is one of the best in the NFL. Meanwhile, Josh Downs had a good matchup. He had Wonder Boy Joe Flacco back, and Downs in PPR, he still gave us a high floor. I think he finished with around 12 or 14-ish PPR points. So it's not like he was a total bust. Let's see. He finished with, 12. He had 9 targets, 6 for 60. It was a misread by us. And it happens. We're not going to get him right all the time. Do I think I made a mistake and should have said Zay Flowers in retrospect? Maybe. And I'm going to tell you why. Zay Flowers, since weeks 5, he's been over 18 PPR points 4 times. And I guess some of those were good matchups. Are we in a world, and I'm kind of happy you brought that up so we can talk, again, we're not going to always get it right. I feel like if I did my due diligence a little bit more, maybe I would have seen that Denver's secondary, is it getting worse? Right? Because I get Patrick Surtain. You can't, Surtain Island. Something's off there because it seems like that's Denver's secondary is going backwards. At one time, they were like, in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, they were up there with Tennessee and the Chargers. The Chargers have gone backwards a little bit. And the Broncos, they're going backwards a little bit. In fact, the NFL average in the past 3 games in PPR, NFL teams are giving up 30.8 PPR points per game. Denver, as of now, they're giving up 37.7, which is a 22.3% differential. And it's not just the inflated Zay Flowers game. Against New Orleans, in that weird-ass matchup, Cedric Wilson, 17.7, Mason Tipton, 10, and then Carolina, as odd as that sounds, Coker goes for 17, Leggett for 13. I don't know. I get that's not big numbers, but I feel like if I would have dug in a little bit more, and this is my fault, I would have seen, well, if guys like Cedric Wilson and Jalen Coker can give us 17 on this great Denver defense, then I think Zay Flowers can do the same. And that was a misread by me. And I'll own that one. I'll 100% own that one. I got to, sometimes you got to dig into recency and not just player names. And, they were really good earlier this year. They were shutting down everybody. And they were. But, like, past couple games, they're getting a little bit leaky. From, like, let's say, like, weeks 2 to 5, weeks 2 to 6, for context, Denver, they didn't allow a wide receiver to get more than 13 PPR points in all but one game from weeks 2 to 6. They were shutting down everybody. And then since then, we are seeing the floor get higher, 17, 17, 29. So, I think that is something to pay attention to moving forward as well. Let's get back into the questions. Okay, J. Phil with a Roma Dunze question. Here we go. So, Dunze is on waivers. How much would we pay to get him? $50 left. So Roma Dunze right now, I'm pretty sure, and this is not a good passing attack. DJ Moore, I don't even know what the hell's going on with him there. Great matchups upcoming. Rome Odunze did have a good game. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 104 yards, 15.4 PPR points. The schedule's favorable. We don't know what's going on with DJ Moore and Caleb, but do we have something to grasp onto here? Even in week 8, only 8.4 PPR points, but he had 6 targets. So back-to-back game, at least 6 targets. That's not bad. He's really the big play guy in this offense. He has averaged over 16.5 yards per catch in 4 different games this season. So we know what his role is. He's the air yards guy. But again, not a lot of volume. If you need that type of a big player or big play player who could potentially give us ceiling games, because again, there's some really favorable matchups if we pay attention. Detroit, Minnesota twice, Detroit twice, Seattle. The fantasy championships, we know rookies sometimes break late, especially at receiver. They build a rapport. So I'm very much interested in the fact that I might go 50%. I might go 50 to 60%. So, $20 to $30, 20, 25, 30, depending on how much you need this wide receiver. Because I don't know if there's a lot of guys on the waiver wire that I can confidently say, hey, if this guy gets fire and the schedule's there, he could potentially be a league winner down the stretch. There's not a lot of guys I can say that about, and I can confidently say that. A lot of things have to go perfectly for the Bears, Caleb Williams, and Rome Odunze, but I think, that talent level is certainly there, and so is the upcoming matchups. Albert, what's going on? Marlon, scaling back to that question. Listen, I'm again, your running back's good. I'm not making that move. Seems like you want to make that move to get Malik. It's probably to get Neighbors, right? Your running back, like, can you start 2 running backs in the flex? Because I'd rather have those 3 backs than Malik Neighbors. And I don't know. Like, what if Mixon goes down? Brees hasn't exactly been great. Like, I would not make this move. You can make it if you want. That is, I think it's risky. JSN what? No, I don't love that move. Let's see, Zach Linton. Oh no, we have another super chat here. This time from Lucas or Lucius. Lucius 44. Is Jordan Mason a drop now? Depending on what you have and what you need, I'm not saying he's a stone cold drop. Do I think he could potentially lose snaps to Isaac Guerrero? I think that's a possibility, but because, the last time we saw Mason, he's banged up, leaving the game, and Guerrero comes in, he's playing really good football. And we also have CMC coming back. But what I keep saying about CMC, how healthy is he? Because the 49ers, they aren't a 7-win team. They aren't a 1-loss team. They're in 3rd place in their division, right? If CMC was if he was healthy enough to go, he would be on the field already. I don't know. I just don't trust the situation. This is multiple lower body injuries. Anything can happen. Like, where I'm not going to say, like, drop Jordan Mason, and then CMC gets on the field. He has a good game or two. Then he's on IR again. Anything can happen. If he doesn't look right, anything can happen. And Jordan Mason has been way too productive for me to say just drop him. Maybe try to find a CMC owner. Maybe trade him. If you have a deep enough bench, stash him. But I'm not outright dropping Jordan Mason right now. I just don't think that's the wise move, because it's not like, it's not like this is just a dude, right? Where, okay, like, let's pick up Jordan. We don't know what Jordan Mason is. He's just CMC's handcuff. We know who Jordan Mason is, and we know he's been hyper productive in the CMC role. He's not just a guy. We know he can do it, and I think that increases his overall value. Whereas, like, what if he was just it's like the Minnesota when Aaron Jones got hurt, and it was like, should I pick up Ty Chandler and start him? Like, no, Ty Chandler's not a good running back. Like, we know he's not. At least I don't think he is. And we've seen him in that role before. When we see players in a role succeed or not succeed, we have to assess that in our fantasy outlook. And my fantasy outlook is I can't just let go Jordan Mason for nothing, because if I'm in a league with you or anybody else and they drop Jordan Mason, I'm going to find a way to get him on my bench because there could be value there. It could be nothing. CMC could play the rest of the year. We'll never see Jordan Mason again. But there's always that what if factor that you're leaving a 20-point per game running back, right? On a good game, most good games. You're just letting him go for free for somebody else to pick up. Tree Hugging Hunter is back. He's saying, thanks. Kyler and Caleb has been killing you. Caleb has. But has Kyler really been, is Kyler killing you? Because, I was feeling the same way because I have a couple of high stakes teams with Kyler Murray as my quarterback, and he's had some rough games, but he's also had some good games. If you look, especially since week 5, he's had 3 out of the past 5 games over 23 quarterback points, depending on where you play. I'm using the stats on RotoWire. Let's say if I pull up DraftKings, he's still over the 20s, but it's a little bit less. Depends on if your league deducts for turnovers. But I have Kyler at 23 plus quarterback points in weeks 5, 7, and 8. He is running the ball again. The issue with Kyler Murray is that this game against Chicago, it was a really bad matchup. And Chicago's defense, they were eaten up on the ground by Cardinals running backs where Kyler and his pass catchers, they didn't have to do anything. And they were moving the football just enough to win the game. But if you take last week away, Kyler has thrown at least 1 touchdown pass in every single game this year. I don't think he's done that ever in his career. Rushing wise, he's rushed for over 45 yards in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games this year. In 3 of those games, he's over 50 yards. He's starting to run the ball like the old Kyler again. So, yes, he's been killing you. He's been killing me. But there's some favorable matchups ahead. And he also exploited, like, if you look in weeks 7 and 8, they faced the Chargers, number 7 against quarterbacks. They faced Miami, number 1 against quarterbacks. And Kyler went for 23 and 25. And you got the Jets upcoming this week. They're number 3. I don't know if we're going to get a game as bad as he did against Chicago because we've seen the Jets become leaky against quarterbacks. I don't know if he gets us over 22, 23 again, but I'm expecting a solid game out of Kyler Murray this week. And then coming out of the bye, Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle again, New England, then the fantasy championship and the game to get to the championship, Carolina and the Rams. I'm very comfortable with Kyler Murray right now. The one I'm really worried about is Caleb Williams. I was very high on him. For some reason, it's just not working. He's flashed at times this year, really good, but he's flashed a lot more bad. So we're caught up with the super chats. We're at the 43-minute mark. I'm going to at least give it an hour today. So let's get caught back up on these questions. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way back up. So if you asked a question earlier and I missed it, ask it again. So I'm going to go on the bottom and work my way back up, which is what we do here when we get to this point of the show. So we're going to start with FaZe Daily Clips TV. Happy Tuesday to you too. Have a few trade offers. Was looking for advice on a full 14-man PPR league. So Evans and Ray Davis for ETN and Waddle. and you already have Tyreek Hill. Evans and Ray Davis. So I don't know. Like Evans is going to be back, right? And we're still seeing Baker Mayfield sling the football and play good football and play competitive football and hanging with the Chiefs even win that defense. Waddle, I'm worried as hell about. When Tyreek Hill is, I think he only had like 6 targets. He was out targeted by Jonnu Smith this week. And that offense seems to be running through Devon Achane right now. I don't know if I want both receivers tied to that offense. And plus, we know Waddle has that injury volatility. I'd rather have Mike Davis and Mike Evans and Ray Davis. Second part of the question, Joe Burrow for Geno Smith and Keenan Allen. Nope, I want Joe Burrow easily. And then just trying to see if this is right. No, I don't like either one of those trades. Certainly not the Geno Smith, and I'm certainly not moving Joe Burrow for Geno Smith. And then the other one is just like, I'd rather have Evans and Ray Davis, especially like we're seeing, 3 out of the past 4 games, Ray Davis is involved. I get it, unlimited opportunities, but he's that handcuff to James Cook, where if James Cook misses time or the Bills, hey, we're on cruise control right now, we need to look ahead to the postseason. We want James Cook to be healthy. Maybe we see Ray Davis a little bit more involved in the offense, but yeah, and especially if you have James Cook, I certainly want to keep Ray Davis. Another super chat from Tyler Sperry. Thoughts on Mike Williams and Khalil Herbert? Well, I talked in depth about these players earlier. If you want like the real in-depth stuff, I talked about Mike Williams right around the 2-minute mark of the show. And I talked about Khalil Herbert in the 8-minute mark of the show. But my initial reaction, I'll give you, the quick reaction to it, since you can go and look, like earlier, I went like a good 5 minutes on Mike, and I went a good 5 minutes on Khalil, I think. Mike Williams is a nice buy low wide receiver, high upside. I think the fit with Russell Wilson, the way they play this offense, fits Mike Williams better. They're going to run. They're going to hit guys like Mike Williams and George Pickens over the top, but he's not a volume guy. He's going to be big play reliant, with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you have room on your roster and you need wide receiver help, I'm buying into not only Mike Williams, but to a larger extent, I'm buying into the Pittsburgh Steelers offense moving forward. They added to this defense. They added to this offense today. There are buyers at the trade deadline. They believe they can make a run with what they have now. And so do I. So I want my hands on the offense, like offensive pieces like Mike Williams, because I don't think these past 2 games where this offense looks more prolific with Russ, I don't think that's an anomaly. I bought into Pittsburgh all offseason, assuming Russ was going to be the guy. They pulled, Russ was banged up. I think they wanted to see what they had in Justin Fields, but we are getting exactly what I thought we would get. You go back to the archives and me talking up the Steelers, people thought I was nuts. Well, we are seeing why. We're seeing that come to fruition. Khalil Herbert, I think you can put him on a roster. I'm not running to. I believe he's a standalone handcuff, right? Like they have Travion Williams and Milton in the backfield in Cincy. Neither one of them played over 10 snaps this week with Zach Moss out. It was a full complement of Chase Brown. This is a short week. There's a world where Khalil Herbert might be active on a short week. He's been with the team a minute. I don't think they need to. I don't think they have to. And that's a tough matchup against the Ravens. And I believe the next matchup after that, another top 5 matchup against fantasy running backs. I believe it is the Chargers, and then a bye week. So I don't know if Khalil Herbert, barring injury to Chase Brown, is going to be usable. And when it was all said and done, we know Moss's role began to diminish after a terrific start to the season. He was averaging 10.2 touches per game. Khalil Herbert can get that, but is that something I'm going to I need to have on my roster? I got to drop this guy. There's a short list of players I'm dropping for Khalil Herbert. Ray Davis, he's the guy on the running back on waivers I want because he's attached to, he's getting some run on his own right now, right? He's giving us some good production as a standalone player. Doesn't mean I'd use him, because the past few games he's not getting a ton of snaps, but the snaps he is getting, he's productive with them. But I'd rather have Ray Davis than Khalil Herbert. But again, there's always that chance that Chase Brown gets hurt, then it could be the Khalil Herbert show. But I'm not willing to make any significant drops to roster him. Let's see. And Tyler's saying you can pick up both. Again, it depends on who you're dropping and what you're dropping and what your needs are. C or 3P1C fail, one of our regulars here. How much fab will we drop on Aaron Rodgers Superflex? Wow. If your quarterbacks are Murray, Stroud, and Flacco, this is not a necessity move, right? Because you have Murray and Stroud. I think a lot of people are, really high on Flacco. But I think I like Flacco more. Like, I like the pass catchers for Flacco more than I like Flacco as a fantasy asset. I get what he did with the Browns, but if you look, Flacco's had opportunities this year. 4 of them. Goes for 16, 32, 17, and 8 this week. The matchups upcoming, they're not good. So I would probably go fairly heavy, depending on what you have left, to get Aaron Rodgers and Superflex. Number one, you keeping him and hoarding these quarterbacks. Nobody else can pick him up and use him against you. And again, like Murray, we talked about Murray a little bit earlier. He could be matchup dependent. It's hard to sit him. Like, I probably wouldn't sit him for Rodgers. But what if Murray gets hurt? We've seen it happen in the past. And CJ Stroud, he's getting Nico Collins back. He should be getting better. I think Rodgers is a fine insurance policy. I would rather have Aaron Rodgers because I think he's ascending. And the rapport with Devontae is growing again. I would rather have him than Flacco. If you told me I can drop Flacco for Aaron Rodgers, I would do that in a heartbeat because we have a 4-game sample size with everybody's boy, Joe Flacco, right? Wheels up, Joe. Well, 3 of them were dog shit games, and he had 1 good one, right? Like, we know America, we love to buy into the underdog story. I think the Joe Flacco story is going to end in retirement. So Michael Glore, actually Kyle, you were first. Elijah, you were first. It's hard doing this by yourself sometimes. You get all these questions coming in, which we're really appreciative of, but it's sometimes hard to keep track. So Elijah, and I'll keep going for a few more minutes. Should I trade Devonta and Tank Dell for Tyreek Hill? Maybe. No more Stephon Diggs. That obviously raises Tank Dell's value. Nico coming back is really, I think, could potentially skyrocket Tank Dell's value. The Devonta Smith, who, like, a lot of people are like weird on Devonta Smith. This is one of his, I don't know if there was a season where we were getting a more consistent version of Devonta Smith. Right? Like, he had that bad game against the Giants where we were scripted out. The Eagles kicked their ass. They didn't need him. But, like, if you look, he's being used. He's had a touchdown in 3 out of his past 4 games. The volume, like, he's not going to get A.J. Brown volume, but he doesn't really need it. I don't know if I'm making this move to get Tyreek Hill. The only way, like, I would say, yes, make the move, but only if you have enough wide receivers where you could afford to lose 2. If you can't, if your wide receiver depth isn't good, I'm not making this move because I do think there's risk involved with Tyreek Hill. We've seen him, and again, he can turn it on at any time, and he could be a league winner. But am I a little bit worried? The offense right now, if we're paying attention, is running through Devin Achane. Tyreek Hill had 9 and 5 targets in the past 2 games with Tua and under 13 PPR points. He got no red zone looks this week and only 2 red zone targets last week against Arizona. Like, some nice schedule ahead. The playoff schedule is great from weeks 15 to 17. Like, yeah, you make the deal, but if you're telling me, like, hey, if I make this deal, my wide receiver depth is not good, Like, if your wide receiver depth is like, and I like Quentin Johnson's a waiver wire pickup, but like if you're left with like Quentin Johnson and like Jalen McMillan, or like, like I'm like, I'm not making this move. Like, you have to have good enough wide receiver depth to where if you make this move and somebody gets hurt, you're not going to cripple yourself. Matt G was offered Kamara Neighbors. Kamara for Neighbors, 12-team redraft. The running backs were Achane Hunt, Jordan Mason. Whew. Wide receivers, Tyreek Neighbors. So you would be getting Kamara. I think you have to make the deal. I don't know if I want to make the deal, but I think you have to make the deal. Your running backs are Achane, which is fine. Hunt, you might have 4 games left because the expectation is Pacheco's back by December. That's the expectation, not the rule. So we got to be, but like, we don't know. And then you don't want to like not have like an extra running back if Pacheco does come back. And then Jordan Mason, like, at least CMC's coming back. I would hold on to Jordan Mason, but you can't start him. And then wide receiver-wise, Tyreek Neighbors, Devontae, Tillman, Leggett. I think there's enough there. I don't love moving Neighbors, but I talked about it a lot today. I talked about it in the past few shows. Neighbors has great matchups. He's getting volume. The production we saw early this season is not there. And without Andrew Thomas, it's not. Daniel Jones doesn't have the time to get Neighbors the ball. I said it earlier. Past 3 games, Neighbors, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe the stats aren't updated, but I'm showing in the past 3 games 0 red zone targets. Maybe the stats aren't updated for this week yet, but at least that's what I'm seeing in front of me on RotoWire. But like in that 3-game stretch where he was going over 20-something fantasy points every game, he had a total of 6 red zone targets. So something is a little bit off. I think you make that move getting Alvin Kamara because you need to bolster your running back room going into the fantasy playoffs. Alicia Collard, do I grab Baker off of waivers and drop Love? You also have Stroud. This is a tough one. I don't like dropping Jordan Love or Stroud. Stroud obviously getting Nico Collins back. Jordan Love just hasn't been the same guy. Like, in early this year, from weeks 1 to 7 in the games he started, minus the games he was hurt, he was over 21 fantasy points in every one of them. And then in the past 2 games, he has not looked right. I don't know if he's playing through injury, but these were decent. Like Detroit was, middle of the pack matchup, and you can throw on them. He couldn't get going. Jacksonville, one of the best matchups on paper. He couldn't get going whatsoever. And this was a guy who threw at least 2 touchdown passes in every game through week 7. And he had 3 games with either 3 or 4. In the past 2 games, 0 touchdowns. He's now thrown an interception in every single game this year. Something is off. Do I think it gets corrected? Yes. Do I pick up Baker Mayfield for Jordan Love? I do. It might sound crazy. I might say yes here. CJ Stroud's good. He's going to get Nico back, which raises his value. And Baker Mayfield right now is just the better fantasy quarterback. He's given us well over 20 fantasy points in every game but one, which was back in week 12 against Denver. Even yesterday against KC, depleted weapons, tough matchup on the road in the rain. 20 fantasy points. So yeah, and I think I like his matchups down the stretch a little bit better, including the fantasy playoffs, week 16 and 17. You get Dallas, that smoke show, and Carolina in the fantasy championship. It is wheels up for Baker Mayfield. We can make that move. Kevin, are we buying Anthony Richardson Dynasty? Yeah, low. I'll buy low on Anthony Richardson. Why not? The Colts made it adequately clear, and teams call asking the price for Anthony Richardson. The Colts aren't trading. I still believe they see Anthony Richardson as their future. And I get what the Colts said after this horrific showing in primetime. Joe Flacco is still our guy. I don't believe it. I think we see Anthony Richardson back this season. And at worst, he's back next season in week 1. And guess what? That same upside we bought into Anthony Richardson last year, people are going to buy back in. I might even buy back in. I don't think his skill set and the talent is an anomaly, right? I don't think it's a wash. I just don't think he has enough NFL experience yet. And I think the maturity plays a role in it. So as long as you don't have to pay out the ass, yeah, I'm buying Anthony Richardson in Dynasty. Just don't let him, make sure you have a good starter. Like if you're in a situation where you have like a veteran, maybe you have like, I don't know, Stafford, Goff, Cousins, right? And you want to get potential future quarterback one for your dynasty team. You don't want to spend a first on it. Maybe you get Anthony Richardson. It's like your developmental guy, right? You keep him on your bench this year. Hopefully, he works out next year. But at worst, you get another year out of Cousins. If you don't have to count on Anthony Richardson immediately, then yeah, why the hell not? Just don't overpay. Is that Michael Jackson? I'm assuming that's Michael Jackson, your avatar. That's hilarious. Braven Fish. Braven Fish. Fish. Should I trade Hunt and Chase Brown for Cooper Kupp? I would only no. I think both these running backs are too damn valuable, and I like Kupp. I do think we are seeing a regressive Cooper Kupp. He looks slower out there. I do think he is the wide receiver 2 next to Puka Nacua when both are healthy. He had a monster target volume last week. Well, Puka Nacua got thrown out of the game early. You're going to concede Hunt. I don't mind Hunt so much because we're going to probably see Pacheco at the end of the month, early December. But Chase Brown, no more Zach Moss. I'm not buying into I get Herbert's a good running back and he was misused in Chicago. Was he misused? Or, right? Because I think we got to remember here, right? We got fantasy Twitter, fantasy community, and everybody knows better than NFL GM scouts and coaches. Was Khalil Herbert misused? Or was he buried on the depth chart for a reason? I don't know. So no, like Chase Brown's going to probably be the guy barring injury rest of season, and he played almost the whole game snap-wise. He conceded like under 20 snaps to the 2 backup running backs this week about Moss, which shows his durability. I don't mind getting rid of Hunt, but I don't want to move off of Chase Brown. Let's start winding down so I can go eat some dinner and get some bets in tonight. Soccer, basketball, maybe. Elijah again. If I got Tyreek, my wide receivers would be down. CeeDee Lamb, BTJ, Rome, Hill, and Purcell. Let me go back to your question. Should I trade Devonta and Tank Dell for Tyreek? So you would still have Downs, which I like, CD, which I like. I think you can do it. Yeah, I think you can make that move. I think you're good enough depth-wise. Would I counter with Devontae Adams or Tyreek? So this is Matt's question. No. I would rather have Tyreek and maybe Devontae, like maybe counter Kamara from Devontae and keep the Neighbors ceiling of targets because I think Neighbors will get targets down the stretch over Devontae. So maybe you give up Devontae instead of Neighbors, but I don't hate you're in a jam, right? If the guy's being a prick and he's like, no, I want Neighbors, then I think you have to make the deal. I'm not moving Tyreek Hill. He has way too much ceiling. I'd rather gamble on that ceiling down the stretch. I would rather move Devontae over Neighbors, but again, guy could be a prick and say, listen, you need a running back really bad. You might have to make the move, and that's fine. You got to play the game. You got to play the cards that are dealt to you. Steve, trade JSN for Jonathan Taylor. Who are you getting? If you're getting Jonathan Taylor, that's an absolute smash sell high on JSN. Kyle, and we're going to wind down. Should I trade Aaron Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown? or Tyreek for Brees and Devonta. So you'll be trading Aaron Jones and Amon-Ra or Tyreek for Brees and Devonta. No, I'm keeping your guys like Aaron Jones. Like I get the allure of Brees Hall. We're just not getting the best version of Brees Hall right now. Let's pull up Brees and make sure I'm not missing anything. But like Aaron Jones has been like fucking outstanding this year. And again, like the offense is very much Aaron Jones dependent. Yeah, like Brees, he's giving us these big pop games, and then he's giving us like he's like minimized. Like 3 out of his past 5 or 4 out of his past 6 games under 10 PPR points, 3 of which in the single digits. Not getting used in the red zone enough. Not getting targeted enough. Now, the matchups down the stretch for Brees Hall, they're all outstanding. But if you look at Aaron Jones, they're pretty damn good for him too. And I get it. Aaron Jones has been quiet 3 out of his past 4 games. He had 6, 20, 11, and 12. So a little bit of a higher floor. And Brees does have a higher ceiling. I think it's just risky. Let me reassess. So Aaron and Amon-Ra or Tyreek for Brees and Devonta. I would need, if I'm making this move, I think I would need no. The holdup is the Amon-Ra and Tyreek side. I think the running backs, like name value wise, yeah, sure. Brees Hall is a larger name than Aaron Jones. Production wise, they're not that far apart. Where I think the Amon-Ra Tyreek ceiling is a lot higher than the Devonta ceiling. I don't mind getting Brees and Devonta. I just don't know if I'm willing to give up Amon-Ra or Tyreek to make the move. There's got to be something else that you could put together to acquire these players. I like getting these players. My holdup is the Amon-Ra or Tyreek part of the deal. D2 Fly, Kyler Murray, or Bo Nix. If this is a rest of season question, I'm still on the Kyler Murray side. TZ, Jacobs for Hopkins. Who are you? I would rather have the Hopkins side rest of season, and that's just me. I'm fully bought into this. The DeAndre Hopkins of Kansas City. I think it's going to be deadly moving forward. Maybe I'm wrong. Right? Maybe this take blows up in my face, but I think there's something special brewing with this Chiefs offense. If it plays the way it did last night down the stretch, I mean, this is a Chiefs offense. We have not seen click like this in a long time. Also, would I trade Jamar, Bigsby, and Downs for Nico and JT? So Chase, Bigsby, and Downs for Nico and JT? Absolutely not. And there's not many people on this planet that love Nico Collins more than I do. Nope. And the holdup is like Chase is he's coming off a bad game. He's going to have a lot more good games down the stretch than bad games. I don't mind getting rid of Bigsby and Downs. I don't mind getting JT. I just rather have Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow down the stretch than Nico and Stroud. And again, I love Nico and Stroud. Nico is one of the, you make him case he's a top 5 or better receiver in the NFL. There's some Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow together is special. Like that's like OG Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams to me. Well, all in one show, Burrow. So what are we doing here? This is all right. So this is my lineup before the Puka trade. Burrow, Gibbs, Swift. Okay. Currently 5-4 off of a 5-game win streak. So hopefully Puka trade keeps me going. Yeah, again, we talked about this earlier. I like the move getting Puka Nacua. I think it certainly strengthens your wide receiver room that does have some injury volatility with T. Higgins and now with London. So, yeah, that is a great move for you. And a really good team overall. Love Burrow. Your running backs are outstanding. You've got Pollard on the bench. So, yeah, it's a really nice move for you. And then we're going to close out with PJ. Stafford or Hurts. Again, I'm going to assume, since you didn't specify this week, if this is rest of season, obviously Jalen Hurts. I'll give you a this week answer too, because I don't think you really asked that question if it was rest of season. So this week we have Jalen Hurts getting Dallas. Jalen Hurts. Jalen might go nuts this week on this banged up Dallas Cowboys team. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable saying Jalen Hurts over Matthew Stafford. But we're going to wrap up for now. A lot of videos released today, people. Kicker streamers by Hoff, Pete Nova's defensive streamers, my waiver wire video, panic meter videos, clips from our live shows. Tomorrow we start turning the page into week 10 officially. We have start, sit, running back and wide receiver videos dropping tomorrow. Quarterbacks and tight ends normally drop Thursday early. Plus, Pete does a running back and wide receiver rankings videos as well. The mediators will be live tomorrow night with week 10 buy, sell, hold. And of course, to close out the week with live shows, we're back Thursday night, Friday night, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, to get you ready for week 10. I'm Anthony Servino. This is the Face Off Sports Network. We'll see you, man.